For nearly 2 weeks, the Middle East has been living inside a pause. Not peace, not stability, but a ceasefire thin enough to tear under pressure. Now that pause is shaking. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is drawing a hard line at the Strait of Hormuz, warning that any military vessel attempting to enter the narrow waterway will be treated as a direct breach of the ceasefire with the United States. Civilian ships, Iran says, may still pass, but only under strict conditions and under Iranian oversight. Any uniformed presence at sea, regardless of the flag or the stated mission, risks triggering what Iran describes as a firm and decisive response. At the heart of this confrontation is a corridor of water so strategically vital that even a rumor of disruption can move global markets. The Strait of Hormuz is the gateway between the Persian Gulf and the open ocean, and roughly a fifth of the world's oil and a substantial share of liquefied natural gas normally flow through it. When it tightens, the world feels it at the pump, in shipping rates, in insurance premiums, and in the price of everything downstream. What is new is the tone, the timing, and the stakes. The ceasefire that ended weeks of heavy fighting was supposed to stop the bleeding. Instead, it appears to have shifted the battle to a different arena, from airstrikes and missiles to maritime control, choke points, and the question of who decides what safe passage really means. Iran is insisting the strait is open but not free. The Revolutionary Guard is portraying itself not as a disruptor, but as the manager of the waterway, claiming the passage remains available under what it calls intelligent management. That framing is not just rhetoric. It signals a doctrine. Ships can transit, but only in a system Iran says it can regulate, monitor, and when it chooses, restrict. The United States rejects that premise outright. In recent days, the U.S. military has said American naval forces have moved through the strait in a mission tied to mine clearing and safeguarding commercial shipping. The stated intent is straightforward: to remove the threat of sea mines and ensure a route for global trade. But Iran has denied key elements of those claims and responded with threats that raise the risk of direct contact between U.S. warships and Iranian forces. The most dangerous part of this standoff is that each side is describing its actions as defensive while treating the other side's actions as provocation. And in the Strait of Hormuz, defensive can look like a destroyer entering a tight passage, a patrol boat shadowing it, drones overhead, coastal missiles on alert, and a single misread signal away from catastrophe. This new escalation is also unfolding under the current U.S. President, Donald Trump, whose approach has now turned from diplomacy under pressure to enforcement by force at sea. The talks meant to stabilize the ceasefire held in Islamabad and stretching into the night ended without an agreement on the core issue, Iran's nuclear program. And when negotiations collapsed, Washington didn't just issue a warning, it issued an order. In a statement that immediately reverberated across the region, he said, effective immediately, the finest in the world will begin the process of blocking any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. That single line changes the entire geometry of the crisis. A blockade is not a threat of future action, it is an action. It is an attempt to control movement, and in international waters adjacent to Iranian territory, enforcing a blockade means boarding, turning back, or interdicting vessels potentially under the watch of Iranian forces that believe the same space is theirs to command. The U.S. plan, as described, includes stopping ships that are seen as cooperating with Iranian demands and expanding operations to neutralize suspected sea mines. Washington's argument is that Iran has been using the strait as leverage, restricting access, raising the cost of passage, and intimidating shipping companies into compliance. In that view, clearing mines and enforcing passage is not escalation, but restoration. Iran sees it differently. From Tehran's perspective, a U.S. naval blockade is an attempt to shatter one of Iran's most powerful tools, control over the region's central choke point, and to do it in a way that risks humiliating the Revolutionary Guard, undermining Iranian sovereignty, and stripping Tehran of both economic influence and strategic deterrence. And so Iran's response has been to issue its own warning. Military ships in the strait are not just unwelcome, they are, in Iran's telling, a violation of the ceasefire itself. That framing is crucial. If Iran convinces itself and its domestic audience that a U.S. destroyer in the strait is proof the ceasefire has been broken, then retaliation becomes, in Iran's logi, sea enforcement rather than aggression. That is how wars restart. The ceasefire, after all, came after weeks of intense hostilities that shook the region. During that period, Iran launched repeated retaliatory attacks against what it described as strategic U.S. and Israeli targets, while the United States and its partners struck Iranian military infrastructure. The fighting also reached into the maritime domain, where fear of mines and attacks slowed traffic, sent insurers scrambling, and rattled energy markets. Even with the ceasefire, the strait hasn't returned to normal. Shipping traffic, by many accounts, has remained reduced. The region's maritime economy doesn't restart simply because politicians announce calm. Commercial operators need predictability, clear routes, stable rules, reduced risk. If a ship's captain believes the passage might contain mines, or that a patrol boat might demand compliance, or that a warship might turn them around, they hesitate. And when hundreds of captains hesitate, global supply chains feel it. Iran has allowed some vessels to pass, particularly those it considers friendly or non-threatening. But there have been growing reports of stricter controls and potential toll mechanisms that would, in effect, turn access to a global trade artery into a revenue stream and into a political filter. Washington says it will not accept that. The U.S. message is that commercial shipping should not have to pay for permission to cross an international passage. The American argument is that any system of fees or forced compliance under threat of attack is extortion, not regulation, and that the world cannot allow a single military force to set conditions for global energy transit. Iran's counter-argument is that the threat came first from U.S. pressure, sanctions, strikes, and military deployments, and that Iran's posture in the Strait is a legitimate response in a region where it is surrounded by adversarial bases and naval power. TH arguments can be made, both arguments can be believed, and that is what makes the moment so volatile. Because when both sides feel justified, restraint becomes politically expensive in Washington. There is pressure to prove that the U.S. Navy can operate where it chooses and protect global commerce. Any retreat would be read as weakness by rivals abroad and opponents at home. In Tehran, there is pressure to show that the Revolutionary Guard remains a decisive power on Iran's front lines and that it cannot be forced into submission by foreign ships at its doorstep. That pressure tends to produce postures, and postures produce accidents. Meanwhile, the tactical reality of the Strait of Hormuz is unforgiving. It is narrow, crowded, and close to shore. It is not the open ocean where naval forces can maneuver with space and time. In the Strait, you have tight lanes, civilian traffic, limited margin for error, and constant surveillance. A drone sighting, a radar lock, a warning shot, a mine-like object in the water, any of it can produce a chain reaction, and mines are a particularly destabilizing factor because they weaponize uncertainty. You don't need to sink a ship to disrupt the corridor. You only need to convince the world that a ship might sink. That is why the U.S. emphasis on mine clearing matters. Mine warfare is not just about removing explosives, it is about restoring confidence. But mine clearing is also slow, visible, and vulnerable, a process that requires time in the water and creates opportunities for confrontation. Iran's military leadership has paired its warning with language designed to deter. The message is essentially, cross our red line and you will be pulled into consequences you cannot control. It is meant to make U.S. commanders think twice, to make shipping companies pressure Washington, and to make regional allies worry about being caught in the blast radius. The United States has paired its blockade announcement with its OW and deterrent message. Cooperate with Iranian restrictions and you may be intercepted. Threaten U.S. forces and you will face overwhelming response. These are not complementary messages. They are competing claims to authority. And hovering above all of it is the unresolved question that broke the talks: Iran's nuclear program. The negotiations did not collapse over minor language. They collapsed over the issue that Washington frames as existential and that Tehran frames as sovereignty. As long as that remains unresolved, every other tension becomes sharper because each side assumes the other is buying time. The ceasefire in that sense becomes less a resolution and more an intermission. The most immediate question now is how enforcement would actually work. A blockade in the Strait of Hormuz is not simply a declaration. It requires identifying ships, tracking ownership, determining whether a vessel has complied with Iranian demands, and then physically stopping it if necessary. HAT means boarding teams. That means ships maneuvering close to one another. That means decisions in minutes, sometimes seconds. And Iran's response is likely to be layered. It can escalate with speedboats, drones, coastal missile deployments, electronic warfare, harassment tactics, or legal declarations that attempt to delegitimize U.S. actions. Iran can also attempt to pressure energy markets by creating fear even without direct engagement. The greatest danger is a small clash that becomes politically impossible to contain, a warning shot that hits the wrong target, a boarding attempt that goes sideways, A mine incident that kills civilians, a drone that is misidentified, a patrol boat that gets too close. In a crisis this tense, it doesn't take much to trigger a cycle of retaliation. What happens next will also depend on whether regional actors are pulled in, allies, partners, and proxies who might see opportunity or obligation. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a U.S.-Iran chokepoint. It is bordered by states that would immediately feel the consequences of any extended shutdown, and the economic consequences would be global. Even partial disruption could drive energy prices higher, strain shipping schedules, and deepen inflationary pressures far beyond the region. Countries that rely on Gulf energy flows in Asia, in Europe, everywhere would face immediate shocks. And even those that don't rely directly would face knock-on effects through markets and supply chains. That is why this moment matters far beyond the Gulf. Right now, the world is not watching an abstract argument about maritime law. It is watching a contest over who controls a critical artery and whether a fragile ceasefire can survive a test at sea. Iran is saying military ships entering the strait violate the ceasefire. The United States is saying the Navy will blockade the strait to ensure ships move freely, and Iran cannot profit from control. Those positions collide in the same narrow waterway, and unless one side blinks or both sides find a face-saving off-ramp, the Strait of Hormuz may become not just the symbol of the crisis, but the place where it reignites. Because when you turn a choke point into a front line, the margin for error disappears, and in a region already scarred by weeks of fighting, a single miscalculation could be enough to drag the Middle East back toward the edge of all-out war, with the rest of the world feeling every ripple.